It's a little bit of both. The GOP base was always less pro-free trade than the GOP kind of establishment, but also Trump took the GOP base and made them less pro-free trade by speaking eloquently, or perhaps not always eloquently, but powerfully.
You're watching Restoring America, where we shine a light on the fundamental values of this country and all the reasons why they're worth saving. This week, we're going to talk about the free market, whether the U.S. even has one today, and whether the U.S. should still want one. I'm Kaylee McGee-White, and this is Restoring America. For decades, limited government conservatives have advocated economic policies that protect and enhance the free market, meaning the center of American society where business occurs and commerce is established. Those policies called for a hands-off approach from the government, especially in regards to trade. The argument is that the more government meddles, the less efficient and more expensive life for the average American becomes. Whereas, if the market is allowed to work unimpeded by excessive regulation and pick its own winners and losers, American consumers will be better off. But the political realignment the U.S. has experienced over the past few years has brought with it a new skepticism of free market economics, and more specifically, of free trade. President Donald Trump was one of the first to openly question the free trade model and pursue tactics that require a heavier hand from the government, such as tariffs, with the goal being to protect American industry and American workers. But who was right? The free trade advocates or the protectionists? My guest today will help us break down this debate. But before we get to him, make sure to subscribe, like, and for more, head to washingtonexaminer.com. With me today is Brad Palumbo, the co-founder of Based Politics and a contributor for the Washington Examiner. Brad, thanks so much for joining us. Now, you've written about this a lot, about how the Republican Party has undergone a really large transformation in regards to economic policy over the past several years, and specifically in regards to trade. We've moved much more from free market advocacy to protectionism. What do you think are some of the reasons for this shift over the past several years?
Well, one of the reasons is named Donald Trump. I think he did an effective job speaking to American workers who felt left behind, who felt their towns or their cities had been hollowed out by jobs moving overseas and other things, people who were essentially let to fall through the cracks, because free trade is an economic net positive, but it has both winners and losers. And I think one of the failures of free market, free traders of the GOP in the past has been having adequate solutions for the people who do fall through the cracks, who do lose from trade, who maybe we should have had more job retraining programs. Maybe we should have had relocation funds to help people. Maybe we should have done more to keep America's business environment competitive so some of those factories would stay open. But he's come forward and spoken to them with these solutions via tariffs and trade wars that have in many cases really not helped the people they're supposed to help, and amount to taxes on workers and have made the cost of living go up, and in some cases even hurt manufacturing output. So it's an interesting question. Did Trump move the party, or had the party moved and Trump simply spoke to them? I think the correct answer is it's a little bit of both. The GOP base was always less pro-free trade than the GOP kind of establishment, but also Trump took the GOP base and made them less pro-free trade by speaking eloquently, or perhaps not always eloquently, but powerfully in favor of trade restrictions, but often flubbing the kind of economics and facts behind some of the policies he was advocating for.
And it's such an important point that you raised about American workers being left behind, because that is one of Trump's principal arguments when he advocates for protectionism, specifically when he's arguing in favor of increased tariffs. He argues, towards manufacturing workers whose jobs have been left behind over the past several years. But is protectionism really going to save those manufacturing jobs, or are there better solutions out there for America's workers?
Well, sometimes there are no easy solutions, but that's not a good answer for a politician to offer to a voting base, right? They need to have an answer. They need to have a solution. But sometimes doing something is actually worse than doing nothing. And that's what I think the unfortunate reality of many of Trump's trade policies have been. For example, one of the things he tried to do was reshore and reestablish American steel manufacturing by putting tariffs on imported steel. Now, did that effectively boost US manufacturing, like he said? No. It did boost steel manufacturing, and some thousands of jobs were protected narrowly in that sector, but hundreds of thousands of jobs were lost in other manufacturing sectors that rely on steel as an input because their costs went way up and they had to lay people off. So this kind of thing, it's almost like the genie is out of the bottle in many ways. And I don't know that you can restore US manufacturing to its former might. Now, US manufacturing is actually still going strong in terms of output because we've automated a lot of the process. We still produce a lot, but the employment is significantly down, of course. And that is unfortunate for those workers. But I think the focus should be on a couple things. It should not be trying to put the genie back in the bottle because I just don't think that works. And I think Trump's trade policies showed us how you can't really undo that dynamic economic change. And two, we should be trying to focus on, well, how can we create other opportunities for these hardworking Americans to do something else fulfilling, engaging, and rewarding in their communities or elsewhere in the country or something like that, rather than trying to go back in time, because there's really not, we could make US manufacturing more competitive by having lighter regulations, lower taxes on business, other things, and we might be able to undo some of the damage. But ultimately, you're not going to make manufacturing in the US more efficient than manufacturing somewhere where they can pay people 50 cents a dollar or 50 cents an hour. It's a tough genie to put back into a bottle. And I don't know that there's really a way to reshore that. I think adaptation and focusing on expanding other opportunities is a more promising avenue.
I want to talk about Trump's tariff plan for a moment. He's running his presidential campaign right now. And one of the things that he's proposed is not only expanding the tariffs that he implemented during his first term, but actually implementing a flat rate tariff that would apply to all U.S. trade partners, including our allies. Now, Trump has argued that this will help the U.S. counter China. Is that true? Would it help the U.S. counter China? Is there a better solution out there?
No, I don't think putting up economic barriers and taxes on Americans between us and our allies helps us beat China. I mean, we are in a Cold War with China, effectively, especially an economic Cold War, but putting taxes on Canada that American consumers have to pay doesn't help us win that. If anything, one of the best ways to combat China and to reduce our economic reliance on China would be to have more free trade with other countries that we can get things from that aren't run by the CCP. So we should have more free trade with Pakistan. We should have more free trade with India. We should have more free trade with South Korea, more with Canada, more with Mexico, countries that we can rely on and do have shared values with and aren't in a hostile standoff with. But putting taxes on them is first and foremost going to massively increase costs for American households by thousands of dollars per year, because that's ultimately who bears at least a portion of the tariffs. And we can't afford that. One of Trump's most powerful arguments against Biden is the terrible, crushing inflation that happened under Biden's presidency. But he kind of takes away that argument, or at least greatly weakens it, when he's also campaigning on a plan that would increase costs for your average household by thousands of dollars per year. You can look at any independent analysis. And Trump can say that it will. He keeps insisting that these are taxes on other countries, and that's only technically true. But in the same way, a sales tax is formally a tax on a business that a business has to pay, but they just add it to your bill and it's on the receipt and the consumer pays it. So technically, it's not a tax on the consumer, but in effect, in reality, the economic pain from that tax is borne by the consumer. And the same thing is true for tariffs. So Trump can keep saying, and it's technically true, no, it's a tax on other countries, not a tax on Americans. But ultimately, it is a tax on the Americans because they're going to have to pay more for basically everything they buy under this system. And I don't think Americans have a lot of extra money in their pockets right now to be spending on clothes and food and expenses and everything. I think, if anything, you should be running on the opposite message, that we're going to make America affordable again, like it was during Trump's first presidency. But instead, he's running against Biden's increased costs while campaigning on a plan that pretty much economists universally agree would increase costs. That seems self-defeating to me.
These are all great points. Thank you so much for joining, Brad. This has been Restoring America with Kaylee McGee White, and for more exclusive interviews, breaking news, and conservative views, be sure to check out washingtonexaminer.com.